It started as a normal Sunday afternoon. The sun was out, kids were riding bikes. And my sister, 8 months pregnant, just wanted to enjoy a peaceful walk around her neighborhood. But that calm didn't last long. Out of nowhere, 2 guys, wearing what looked like official uniforms, rolled up in a beat-up SUV, flashing badges that didn't quite look right. They claimed to be from the neighborhood security team, acting like they were some kind of HOA police. The problem? There's no such thing in our area. We don't even have an active HOA anymore. At first, my sister thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. She tried to stay calm, even as they started questioning her about unauthorized visitors and parking violations that didn't exist. But things escalated fast. One of the fake cops blocked her path and made a move that no one saw coming. He put his hands on her, shoving her back slightly while yelling about compliance. She stumbled. Luckily, she didn't fall, but she was clearly shaken. That's when her husband, who had been grabbing something from their car just a few steps away, saw it all happen. Now, let me just say he's usually the calmest guy in the room. But when he saw his pregnant wife get shoved by some random wannabe cop, he snapped. What happened next was something you'd only expect to see in a movie. One of the guys got his jaw cracked with a single punch. The other ended up flailing into a fountain head first, soaking wet and yelling like a toddler who lost his toy. Neighbors started coming out, phones were recording, and someone finally called the actual police. But that's just the beginning. What the police uncovered next about these fake HOA cops took everything to a whole new level, and, trust me, it wasn't just about impersonating officers. There's more to this story than anyone could have imagined. Stick around, because you're not gonna believe who these guys really were. As the police sirens echoed down the street, neighbors crowded the sidewalks, whispering and filming. My sister sat on the curb, clutching her belly, her husband standing protectively beside her, fists still clenched. The 2 men who claimed to be HOA officers weren't saying much now. One was sitting on the edge of the fountain, soaked and shivering, while the other clutched his jaw, clearly in pain but trying to act tough. When the officers arrived, it was obvious they weren't dealing with any real security team. That's when things got strange. The cops asked for IDs. These guys hesitated too long. One handed over a cheap-looking badge and a fake ID that didn't even match his face properly. The other kept saying he was contracted by the HOA board, but couldn't name a single person from it. It was like they had rehearsed a script and were now fumbling to remember their lines. And the weirdest part, one of the neighbors swore she had seen them a few days earlier, knocking on doors and taking pictures of people's yards. Turns out, they had been making rounds for over a week, pretending to find homeowners for made-up violations like untrimmed hedges or unauthorized lawn furniture. People had started paying them, thinking they were legit. One elderly couple even gave them cash on the spot, afraid of getting some kind of penalty. No one thought to question it because they wore matching polos and had clipboards that looked official. And until now, they hadn't gotten physical. But today, they crossed a line and they picked the wrong family to mess with, as the cops began making calls and digging into their vehicle. More details came to light, things that didn't just suggest impersonation, but hinted at something bigger, something organized. And maybe not their first time doing this. As the officers searched the SUV the fake HOA cops arrived in, everyone waited in tense silence. My sister was being checked by paramedics just to be safe, and her husband was giving his full statement, still fuming. But the real shock came when the trunk of that SUV popped open. Inside were stacks of printed HOA violation slips, some filled out with addresses from our neighborhood. There was even a binder labeled patrol reports with made-up notes, completely fake, but detailed enough to look real at a glance. It got more unsettling when the cops found a box full of envelopes. Inside were checks, some even signed, and others with cash totaling over a couple $1,000. That meant people were actually paying them. These guys had been hitting multiple communities, using the same script, the same scare tactics, pretending to be official and threatening made-up fines. It was a straight-up scam, and now it was unraveling fast. One of our neighbors, Mr. Langford, a retired attorney, stepped in and told the cops he recognized one of the suspects. Apparently, this wasn't the first time something shady had happened in the area. Last year, a contractor scammed a few families for gutter repairs and vanished. Same vague company name. Same generic polo shirt. Same smug attitude. It was like these guys had a whole playbook. Meanwhile, my sister was trying to stay calm, but I could tell she was shaken. This wasn't just about someone faking a badge. She felt violated in her own neighborhood. Safe spaces didn't feel so safe anymore. Her husband kept pacing, still asking how these men even got onto the street in the first place without anyone questioning them. And that's when a quiet voice spoke up. A teenage neighbor, probably around 16, mentioned he'd seen the men talking to someone in the community days before, someone we all trusted. That changed everything. Because if they weren't working alone, then who was helping them? The revelation from the teenager hit everyone like a punch. The idea that someone in the community might be behind this scam made the atmosphere even heavier. Questions started swirling. Who could it be? Someone we all saw every day. Someone we trusted with our safety and privacy. The thought was chilling. Suddenly, neighbors who had been friendly before looked at each other with suspicion. Whispers grew louder, and eyes darted nervously. The police began digging deeper, calling around, checking security cameras from nearby houses and stores. Footage showed the fake HOA cops meeting a man in a suit outside a local cafe just days before the incident. The man wasn't a stranger. Some neighbors recognized him as a board member from a nearby, now-defunct community association. That made no sense. Why would someone with a reputation risk being involved in something this shady? Meanwhile, the fake cops were still sitting in the back of the squad car, their silence growing heavier by the minute. One of them finally cracked, saying they'd been hired to clean up the neighborhood by scaring people into compliance, and that the money they collected was supposed to fund community improvements. But none of that added up. No one had voted on this. No one agreed. It felt more like a con than community care. Back at the house, my sister was exhausted but determined. She wanted answers on justice night just for herself, but for every family that had been tricked or intimidated. Her husband was already talking to a lawyer, ready to take this further. The neighborhood was on edge, waiting to see what the real HOA or whoever was really in charge would say. Then, just as things seemed like they might calm down, a sudden message circulated among residents. The so-called community board member was calling an emergency meeting to address the scandal. Everyone was invited. But some neighbors whispered that not everyone trusted what would be said. Could this meeting expose the truth, or would it only deepen the mystery? The tension was electric. What would happen next? The answers felt just out of reach, and everyone was holding their breath. The day of the emergency meeting arrived, and the whole neighborhood buzzed with nervous energy. Families gathered in the community center, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. Everyone wanted answers, and many hoped this would finally clear the air. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. Just as the board member stood up to speak, the lights flickered on, then went out completely. A collective gasp filled the room. Phones lit up. Whispers turned into murmurs of confusion. When the lights came back on, the board member was nowhere to be found. Instead, an envelope sat on the podium. Inside were documents that shook the foundation of what we thought we knew. The papers revealed a secret agreement between the board member and the fake HOA cops, an illegal plan to use intimidation and fake fines to push certain residents to sell their homes cheaply. It wasn't just about collecting money anymore. It was a scheme to manipulate the entire neighborhood's property values for personal gain. Neighbors stared at each other in disbelief. The trusted community leader was involved in a plan that could destroy families, including my sister's. Some people began to argue loudly. Others looked away, and a few started to cry. The fake cops' actions were no longer random scams. They were part of a bigger, more dangerous game. Meanwhile, my sister's husband, fueled by anger and a growing sense of responsibility, promised to fight this all the way. But with the board member vanished and the fake cops playing their silence card, it felt like the neighborhood was caught in a storm with no clear way out, as rumors spread about who else might be involved and what would come next. One thing was clear. This was more than just a fake HOA scam. It was a battle for the soul of our community, and the stakes had never been higher. The tension was unbearable, and everyone waited onshore what twist or turn would come next. Just when it seemed like everything was spiraling out of control, the real police arrived with backup and evidence in hand. Turns out, the investigation had uncovered a network far bigger than anyone imagined. The so-called board member was arrested not just for orchestrating the fake HOA cop scam, but for fraud, coercion, and trying to manipulate property sales in multiple neighborhoods. The fake cops, they were caught red-handed with forged badges, illegal money, and enough proof to put them behind bars for a long time. My sister and her husband found some peace, knowing that justice was finally on its way. The community started coming together, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. The HOA scam, which had terrified so many, was exposed and dismantled. People who had felt powerless began to speak out, demanding better oversight and transparency for any future neighborhood groups. But just when we thought the nightmare was over, a message showed up on my sister's phone. It was a text from an unknown number saying, "You only saw the surface. Watch your back." The tone was chilling, and the timing was no coincidence. It left us wondering, had we really uncovered the whole story? Or was there still something lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again? That unexpected twist kept the neighborhood on edge. Even as we celebrated the wins, the feeling lingered that this fight wasn't over. The fake HOA cops incident taught us a hard lesson about trust, courage, and standing up for what's right. But it also reminded us how easily danger can hide behind familiar faces, and that sometimes the biggest threats come from where you least expect. And that's where our story pauses for now, because in this quiet community, with its peaceful streets, the real battle might just be beginning. After that chilling message, the neighborhood didn't know what to expect next. But slowly, life began to settle back into a more normal rhythm. The police kept a close watch, reassuring residents that safety was their priority. The fake HOA cops and the corrupt board member faced serious charges, and the legal process started. Moving forward, it was clear that justice was being served, even if it took time. My sister's husband stayed involved, helping other neighbors who had been scammed, making sure their voices were heard and their concerns addressed. More importantly, the community came together in ways we hadn't seen before. Neighborhood meetings became open forums where people could ask questions and share worries without fear. New leaders emerged, people genuinely invested in making the area safe and welcoming. My sister, despite all she'd been through, found strength in the support around her and focused on her growing family. She often said how important it was to trust your instincts and stand up for yourself when something feels wrong. This whole experience taught us a lot about how easily trust can be broken, especially by those who pretend to have authority. It reminded us that real community means looking out for one another and staying alert to things that don't add up. Scams like the fake HOA cops might seem rare, but they can happen anywhere. And the consequences can be serious. In the end, what kept us strong was not just fighting back but coming together. We learned that courage isn't about never feeling afraid, but about facing fear to protect the people you love. Our neighborhood is still healing, but we're more united and aware now than ever before. And as my sister prepares to welcome her baby, we know this chapter closes not with fear, but with hope for a safer, stronger future.